I am from Barnsley. I was incredibly nervous this morning. Speaker after speaker was so brilliant. And then I realised the wicked sense of humour that Richard's got. How do you follow magic? I thought, which poor sap's following that? He said, it's okay, it's Hans Rosling. Which poor sap is following Hans Rosling? Well, it's me. And I'm going to talk about data, but I always show this. It's particularly pertinent today. In a week's time, it's going to be 40 years since this photograph was taken, the blue planet, the blue marble. The first time our planet had been photographed in full with the sun on it. And I believe it changed our lives. It certainly changed the generation that I grew up with, their lives. It sparked, it is alleged, the emergence of the sustainability movement, the green movement as we used to call it. And indeed, at one stage, it was the most shared image in the world. I mean, obviously, since Twitter and YouTube, that's become talking cats and things like that. That's our backyard. That is the one planet we have. It was very interesting hearing about one planet living. So that is our backyard. That's my locality in lots of ways. When I wondered what am I going to talk about, I thought I'd just put into a Wordle all the stuff I always talk about, and that's it. So I can just sit down now there. But the big word is open. It's about openness, whether it's open source, open innovation, open data, which is what I'm going to talk about today, open government, all sorts of openness. I really believe that's one of the themes of the world we live in, but it begins obviously with Aristotle, as everything does. I was the last boy in Barnsley to learn ancient Greek. Not many people can say that. And obviously Aristotle began with this, and I really believe it. I'm sure everyone, man is by nature a political animal. Now Aristotle, Barbara, did mean men. And still does. No, so he meant man, because obviously it was ancient Athens, and it was us, men, who ruled the roost. But by political, he meant living in a polis, living in a city, living in a locality that had an identity that was human scale and self-sustaining, largely. In fact, ancient Athens was really called the Athenians. It's about the people, it's about the citizens, and that's what I want to talk about today, really. Whatever I talk about data and all that internet and geeky stuff, I'm talking about citizens, individuals. Because the future's already here. It's just not even. I steal lots of people's words, but I think this is really good. What it means is that we sort of know that the future tomorrow is going to be sort of like today. Even when you get to my age, you realize that that's the case. And then suddenly you look back and think, how did that happen? How do your children grow up? How do your grandchildren grow up? What was life before Google? Google's the end of history, as we said about Alta Vista, Facebook. All these sort of things. We sort of know what our world's going to be. Well, it's not going to be Quora, that's for sure. But, you know, iPads and all these devices. I was intrigued by one of the speakers who mentioned about connected television. I really wait for the day when my television is as smart as my microwave, because it's going to be a long time coming just yet, and we have to sit there with laptops and mobiles, etc. But I really believe that taking this stuff beyond people like us, that's going to come when connected television, when that device in the corner of our living room connects you to the sort of stuff that I'm talking about. But the really exciting stuff that's going to happen is the Internet of Things, when never mind these tracking devices we carry in our pockets, which we all call mobile phones, these tracking devices that we carry in our pockets become only a tiny minority of the devices that are in the Internet of Things. By 2020, 50 billion devices will be connected to the Internet. May not be the fridge freezer with the beer in. It will be the bus stop. It will be the parking meter. It could be almost anything. But back to Athens. It's a bit like Brighton. I come from Brighton. That was the two universes. And I was genuine about it. From Brighton to Barnsley is a travel between different universes. In Brighton, we've got the sea at the south and the hills in the east, and it's a self-defined area. It's a bit like Huddersfield, which I read on Wikipedia is a market town. Or is it Kirklees? I really think self-identity of a city or an urban area is really important. I'm sure everyone here feels they're part of Kirklees. I was living up here when it became Kirklees. Anyway, enough of that. My colleagues over there saw that. Oh, anyway, look. I could go on about ancient democracy in Athens. You know, the way that they chose people by lot. The way they ostracized politicians. You buggered off for 10 years. And it wasn't terminal. You could come back. I mean, all these sort of stuff. But that's all old hat. We don't want any of that because we've moved on a lot. You know, we'd sort of do all this really high-tech democracy. But actually, we haven't, have we? And this is the reason for our anxiety. Marshall McLuhan, fantastic source of inspiration. Now, I know about trying to do today's jobs with yesterday's tools and yesterday's concepts, because my background was starting on Wakefield Express, one of the great cities of the world, as was mentioned earlier, but then left to do SoccerNet and SchoolsNet. SoccerNet, created by my 12-year-old, it sold for $40 million. We didn't get it, but it sold when he was just taking his GCSEs, so he was otherwise engaged at the time. And that's where I started out, this sort of stuff. That's it. We now think we've created the mobile device to end all mobile devices, and it's called iPhone 4, 5, or whatever Mark said. And it's only taken 25 years, because, you know, we've done it, job done. But in 1994-95, it was difficult, because SoccerNet was created by a 12-year-old boy putting live football scores on a server in Chicago, 1994-95. There were 40,000 internet connections in the UK at the time. There were 7 ISPs, 2 of them in Brighton. But who on earth, people told me at the Daily Mail while I was a journalist, I admit it, I was at the Daily Mail as a journalist. I'd been at News International as well. Get those things out of the way today. It's a very important day to say that. But they said, who on earth is ever going to get their sports football results off a computer when you've got CFAX? And I was very sad when CFAX disappeared forever last month. This is remarkable. There's so many coincidences. This is remarkably similar to an earlier graphic you saw, but actually, humankind's been on the planet 160,000 years. Cities, 6,000 years. The internet, 50 years. The internet, 50 years. Put things in perspective. We're on the planet. That's the big picture. And we're at this singular juncture of humankind where 70% of the population will live in cities by 2050. There are 640 million people living in the 300 biggest cities. There are 750 cities with more than 1 million people in. Whatever we think about cities, and I love them, I love pavements, and I love buildings, and I love all that sort of built environment, but it's going to happen that way. And this is the world we live in. Marshall McLuhan again, global village. That was the metaphor then. Actually, I much prefer the all-at-onceness, the sort of Twitterness of our lives, the real-timeness of our lives. And of course, he was he was talking about radio. That was going to be the big thing that changed stuff. But the global village isn't really the right metaphor. The idea that the world's got smaller, and that we all know each other, and that you can walk. That's not really true. It's not that the world's got smaller. It's that networks have got bigger, and they've got bigger in real time. They've been using all these devices and technologies we've got. There is still a good proportion of the population that's excluded from that. But basically, we can do all this sort of stuff. And there are people around the world. I saw someone in Paris who was watching us. So when my son ended up at Harvard in the year under, didn't quite do his A-levels the way he wanted, but we had a lot on at the time. But he ended up at Harvard in the year under Zuckerberg. I was really interested in the Facebook.com before it left Harvard. How does this stuff spread? And that got me into the small world phenomenon. We all know that we're 6 handshakes away from, thank God, the man who's still the President of the United States. Or Kevin Bacon, if you're more interested in the Everything Everywhere advert, where he shows no knowledge of what the small world phenomenon really is about. But anyway, there you go. That actually we're 6 handshakes away from anyone on the planet. But if, say, I'm living in Brighton and Hove or Huddersfield or Barnsley or wherever, and I have 7 friends, which on a good day I do, and they have 7 friends, and so on and so on and so on, we're 6 handshakes away from 250,000 people, which happens to be the population of Brighton, happens to be the population of ancient Athens, happens to be the population nearly of the wider Huddersfield area. In other words, there's a complexity there with the devices, with the internet, with small world phenomenon where we're all connected. The future will be, I believe, connected cities, a global network of network cities to replace the patchwork of nation states that we've got at the moment. And I think you can see that happening now. And that will happen because of the greatest invention in openness that we've had, courtesy of Sir Tim Berners-Lee. And that was the web built on the internet. And you can talk it Web 2.0, we're talking government 2.0, city 2.0, society 2.0. I want to talk about humans 1.0. I believe that our open minds, and there are many of them in this room, our open hearts are the future, and the technology is going to help us get there. So we don't need humans 2.0. We need changes of behavior. And it's data that's the lifeblood of the networks. I just want to say something about that first big picture and sustainability and caring for the planet, which I know this is what this is about. The planet's going to be fine, yeah? Whatever happens, it's going to exist. What drives me onward is that human life on that planet has to be more equal, fairer, more distributed, so that we don't have to worry about the sort of issues that we've heard a lot about today. As an end in itself, I'm less than interested. But let's try and keep this planet sustained so we have enough time to build the fair and equal society that certainly I would like to see. And data is the new oil, which we don't burn. It's the raw material. It's what the digital technologies are all about. So we're all ones and zeros at almost every level. So I'm not really talking about ones and zeros, I'm talking about stuff. But if ever I talk about open stuff cities, it all gets a bit weird. So instead, I often describe the talk as about vague but exciting. There we are. So Tim, he explained the web. And his boss at CERN said, very interesting, vague but exciting. Yeah. He talked about the semantic web, where instead of this web of documents, of a computer dumbly just linking from one page to another, we have a mesh of data where computers can understand what that data means. And he explained in 2009, 2010 at TED about open data, raw data now. And that's my message today, is that every organization we have, every business that we're involved in should be releasing data so that we don't have to take someone's word about the birds in the farm. The data is released openly in machine-readable format, no strings attached, for reuse. And magic will happen. There's lots of stuff going on. That means nothing to most people in this room, but it's a requirement that anyone talks about open data. You've got to show the linked open data cloud. Anyway, back to Pericles. Oh, never mind that. Can you still hear me? Pericles, in charge of Athens, very open city. It became a hub of openness, and so every thinker, every philosopher came to it. That's the importance of being open. As Obama found out in 2008 when he committed to this, which was historic. He committed the government in 2008 to transparency, public participation, and collaboration. The least important of which, but the absolute necessary first step, is transparency, because it's a precondition for more productive areas of participation and collaboration. Transparency is this. This is data, isn't it? Ones and zeros, lots of things. I mean, it's, you know, so we have transparency, but that's sort of a one-way exchange. I'm less interested in transparency than releasing data, so it leads to collaboration. Clay Shirky makes reference to the open source movement leading into open data, leading into open government. So in other words, it's not just a one-way exchange, it's a two-way exchange that, like Git, in the open source sort of way, that you can have thousands of people developing code and keeping track of it in different versions, but it's distributed collaboration. No one is in control. My background is newspapers. And you know newspapers, they gather lots of data and information. They keep it incredibly secret until they wish to release it on their terms, at their price, in their way. That is history. Newspapers think, like many organizations, we've survived the internet because we've got the iPad. That's not how it is. What we have to do is release data openly. So you have, how do you engage in what our laws should be? Well, you can have legislation.gov.uk, so all the laws are publicly and openly out there and you can do stuff with them. Or you can do like on my home city, you can go to the library, go to the first store and read a hard copy of it. Data.gov.uk, fantastic delivery of open data relating to our lives. In other words, data about schools and transport and bus stops and buses. Data.gov in the States. I'm going to race through these because I want to get to the last thing. The important thing about opening up data is it challenges the organization. It makes it think it's a different sort of organization. Instead of thinking it's our data and we will just relate to you how we want, it thinks that it releases the data to have a collaborative, co-productive relationship with citizens. And it does it in an agile, iterative, user-centered way. All those sort of words that actually mean that the process is more important than the deliverable. And this is when we have cities that have open data cities, cities releasing their data so that you can know in San Francisco that every parking meter is connected to the internet. 8,000 parking meters. And you can work out where the parking meter is free and the app in your car. By 2020, 90% of cars will be connected to the internet. Can you imagine what that would mean for our cities if we have parking meters connected to the internet? What about water meters connected to the internet? I was intrigued by some of that. It's never mind collecting all that data, but release it. Magic will happen. There are people out there, 12-year-olds, that will make magic. Because the data is the straw that builds the bricks, that builds the walls, the mansions and palaces that we can't imagine yet. We literally cannot imagine them. And the people who are going to build those, the architects, are probably still in our schools and universities. All we can do is release the data. And I'm going to wrap up, as my screen says, with an example. 311 City Services. A non-emergency service in American cities that says, I don't know who can help me, but there's a car that's burned out and it's on my grass verge. I need housing, I need this and the other. One contact point. SMS, Twitter, email, phone calls, whatever. The data gives a voice to the voiceless, because 40% of phone calls to Brighton and Hove City Council, probably to Kirklees Borough Council, lead to no answer. Lead to pass on, no answer. There's several things bad about that. One, appalling customer service and disillusionment with the democratic process and the public service providers. Two, a waste of time and money, and we're paying for that because it happens again and again and again. But most importantly, we don't even know what that call was about. 100 million phone calls in New York across a 24-hour period. We don't need to know the detail, but we know what that's about. 311 is a city having a conversation with itself, just as organizations should be having conversations with their customers, their clients, the people they seek to serve. They should put the user, the citizen, the customer at the center of absolutely everything they should do. So an open data city is that. And after 6,000 years, we're just at the beginning. And we're at a historic moment. So there is no project plan. There is no vision of how this is going to be done. It's not a big IT project. But we do have a strategic plan, as this guy says. And that's called just doing things. And the best way of doing things is doing it collaboratively, co-productively. The best way of doing things is all together. And we're beginning today. And thanks very much.